we want to appreciate and thank many of our families who have logged in for this series for the Healthiest Family Cooking Together. This is a collaboration between Health Education Council, Tomorrow's Kitchen, in providing many of the cooking recipes and ideas that we have in making cooking an experience and inviting for many of our families. And we hope that you have enjoyed this series. I think as a reminder, we mentioned that this is our fourth session out of five. So next week we'll have our fifth and final session, which in this case, we'll have a lot of goodies and prizes and just recognition for you for participating throughout this series. My name is Bertosoto. I work as a coordinator for family community engagement. Ms. Borsi is not available to be here today. And what she would say is like, we appreciate many of your being here today. We sent out some information to you today via text regarding the Nutrition Services app and how you can access many of the menus for our families online. I sent this via a little text message that was sent to you all earlier ago. We appreciate many of your participation, and we hope that you enjoy this series as well. With that, I'm gonna pass along, and I'm gonna let, in this case, Luana just speak a little bit about her role and what she does, and just welcome our families today.
Thank you, Heriberto. So thank you everybody for joining us for our fourth workshop in this series. And like Heriberto said, I'm with the Health Education Council. We're very happy to have you guys here and to provide this workshop for you guys with Twin Rivers. So we could go ahead and go to the next slide. So for today, the topic for today is food labels and meal planning, budgeting and shopping. And this will be, we'll be going over some of these items for today. So next slide. And then for our agenda for today, we're gonna start right away cooking with Chef T, who's gonna be preparing a speedy chili recipe. And then I'll be going through our lesson for today, and we're gonna be talking about nutrition label reading as well as meal plan and grocery list and a fun bean game similar to last week's whole grain game. And then we'll be closing with Chef T and then any questions that you guys may have. Next slide. Okay, so I think we could hand it over to Chef T. She's gonna be preparing a speedy chili recipe for you guys today, and she'll start it off doing the recipe reading with you guys.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to week 4 of the Healthy Families Cooking Together workshop. Today, we'll be making speedy chili, which is wonderful considering how cold it is outside. This recipe, one thing you'll be able to tell just by looking at the recipe is that this isn't your grandma or your auntie simmer all day, smell up the house chili. This is a quicker version for those who have stuff to do in the evening. You have to take the kids to soccer or Boy Scouts, or you have meetings yourself. This is a quick way to get a healthy meal in that you could enjoy with your family. Okay, so the ingredients in this chili are a half cup of onion, a half cup of celery, and both of those are diced. It asks for ground turkey, lean ground beef, or ground chicken. It asks for a can of stewed tomatoes or 3 tomatoes diced, a can of red beans strained, and your base or your tomato product for this chili is soup, which should be very interesting because I've never used soup as a base for chili before. So let's go ahead and get started with our cooking process. A couple weeks ago when we were doing the ginger garlic ramen with the beef, we were talking about browning the meat and the vegetables. And I mentioned that when I brown my beef and my vegetables, I usually do it together to get the aroma in the house. And because while the beef is browning, it also tenderizes the vegetables and everything develops flavor. If you look at this recipe, that's exactly what this recipe calls for. So what we're going to do is go ahead and start our celery. Our onions. And I just put a little bit of oil. This week I've elected to use olive oil, soybean oil blend. As I mentioned before, I rarely use olive oil in cooking because it burns quick. And I want something that can withstand the heat, regardless of whether I have to turn the heat up high or keep it low. You want to simmer this on a medium-high flame. Now that we have our onions in there, we're going to go ahead and put our beef in there. Okay, remember, when they're asking for lean ground beef, they're asking for 85 to 15% beef to fat. But remember also what we talked about the other day, and that was you have to get the beef that coincides with your budget and your requirements. So just again, keep in mind that the higher the fat percentage, the higher the calories, and the higher the fat grams. So right now we have your beef in here with your onions and your celery, and we're just browning it over medium heat while it's cooking. And while we're browning this, let's also talk about options, because as it says on the recipe, you can use ground turkey or ground chicken. Now, the thing you have to keep in mind, both turkey and chicken are naturally lean meats. They do add a little bit of fat in with the meat when they grind it, and that's to help it have a little bit of moisture. But for those, the turkey and the chicken are going to be a lot leaner than the beef, and they're not going to provide that much oil. But you still need to make sure that you drain it all as you go along. So this is coming along fine. We're going to go ahead and let this continue to brown a little bit more while we talk about the rest of our chili. Okay, it asks for red beans, but it asks for red beans. But what I did, I got kidney beans, and they're not salt-free, because when I looked for them, I couldn't find any salt-free beans. But what you can do, when you have canned vegetables, all of your sodium is in the brine. And the brine is what they store them in, it's the preservative. So if you can't find sodium-free product, but you'd rather have it more sodium-free, take your beans or your peas or whatever your vegetable is, drain it and rinse it. It won't get all the salt out, but it'll get a fair amount out. Yeah, your low sodium vegetables are just vegetables packed in water with a little bit of acid, like lemon juice or something like that, some kind of citric acid that serve as a preservative. Okay, so for this, let me show you where we're at. I've browned all the beef and see it's mixed in with the celery. And if you look at it now, you can even see the grease in the bottom. Do you see a grease right here? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drain this the way my mom taught me. And that's just put the lid on. Tilt it over to the side so that your ingredients won't fall out, but it has a little bit of room. And just drain it. I'm draining mine into the old vegetable cans. But remember, you can also get like a Rubbermaid or Tupperware container that can hold up. All you're looking for is a vessel that will hold the heat and won't melt while you're doing it. So anything that you can put in a microwave would be firm enough to hold the grease, because all you're doing is cooling it down so you can throw it away. So we have our beef brown and we drained the excess grease. So now we're going to add the tomatoes. Now the good thing about the tomatoes, I got stewed tomatoes in the can like it said, but this is where you can be a little creative in your choices, because rather than just get regular stewed tomatoes, I opted to get tomatoes with onions, garlic, celery, and green peppers. You know, I also saw stewed tomatoes with basil, some with just garlic, some with different herbs and spices. And that gives you the ability to reach out and try a couple different things. Okay, so we're stirring the tomatoes in. And we're going to go ahead and put the beans in there. And we're going to go ahead and put the tomato soup in there. Now, according to the recipe, we just stir this all together. And we let it simmer for about 15 minutes. Now, as you can see on this recipe, again, it says nothing about salt, pepper, any kind of seasonings or anything at all. So what we're going to do right now is go ahead and let this simmer. And after it simmers a while, we're going to go ahead and season it then. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to send it back over to Johanna and Berto while this simmers. And I'll see you guys in a couple minutes.
So to start off for today, we're going to be doing some nutrition label reading. So we'll be going through an example of a nutrition label and going through some of those label terms. And then we'll be going through some examples of labels of those items that are being used in the recipe for today. We can go to the next slide. So here's an example of a nutrition label. If you guys can see, we'll be going through some of those different terms and what they mean. So we know that whole foods like fresh vegetables, those don't have food labels, but a lot of those canned and boxed items and also the bagged items, they have those nutrition labels on them, but they can sometimes be confusing to read through them. So we'll be going through some of these common label terms that are found on these food items. So to start for this one, we can see that it has the serving sizes per container. So for this example, it has 4 servings per container. So that just tells you how many servings are in that package. And then below it, you can see it says the serving size. So that's how much you should be like eating yourself from that container. So it's just 1 cup. And this is good if you are being mindful of your portions or just of portion control. And then you can see the calories per serving. And that one isn't a big number, so that you're aware of how many calories are in. And as you can see right there, it says per serving. So it's not for the whole container. It's just per serving, which would be 1 cup. So if you want to know how many calories are in the entire package, you would just add it by the servings per the container. So we can go through that first term that says total fat. So we know that fat is needed in small amounts to help the body absorb some vitamins. And we did talk about the different kinds of fats last week. And we talked about saturated fat, how that one comes from mostly animal products as well as trans fat. And that one is found in those processed foods, and that's the one that we want to avoid. So you want to make sure that that one is in the smallest number possible. And then we have carbohydrates, and those we know that those provide energy for our bodies. And sugar is one type that provides quick energy, and starches is another. And that's why those are included under total carbs. And they have to be broken down through digestion for us to get that energy. And as you can see, it has dietary fiber as well. That one can't be broken down for energy, but that's a very important one for our bodies. And then next we have proteins, and those are the building blocks of cells, muscles, and tissues. And most whole foods, besides fruits, have some sort of protein in them. And this is a good one that you want to make sure is a larger number, since we know proteins are good for us. And then we have the smaller percentages are on the bottom, which is the vitamins and minerals. And the vitamins are compounds that are needed by the body in various amounts. So those percentages can vary, and it's not a big deal if they're not too high or if they're too low. There's other, you can get your vitamins and minerals through whole foods like your fruits and vegetables. So those aren't too worrying when you're reading like a packaged product. And then we have those enriched foods, which we talked about a little bit when it comes to those enriched whole grains. And enriched food products, those have had nutrients replaced after the food processing. And so like enriched flour is an example. That one has had those B vitamins added to replace those that were lost in processing. So you want to keep in mind that enriched foods are not always healthier. And the label is usually found in foods that are processed. So you want to make sure that you, like natural food, whole foods that have not had anything removed in the first place, that's what you want to be looking for. And then we have fortified products. Those have had nutrients added, like orange juice. It may be fortified with calcium, for example, and that's for some people who have low calcium, so they add that in there. And that's usually is found in orange juice. And then we have the low sodium foods, which is something that we're talking about today. Those contain less than 100 milligrams of sodium per serving. And low sodium, even though it may say on the label, you want to make sure you read the actual label on the back. Even though it may say like in the front, you want to read that the amount that's in the back. And then we have the no salt or unsalted foods, and those are free of added salt, but they may also have some natural sodium. So even though it says, and you may see on the label that it has some sodium, it's the natural form that's found in the food. It just means that they didn't add any extra salt in there. And then we can go to the next slide. Okay, so how can you make those smart choices for canned, boxed, and bagged foods? So you want to choose foods that are made from those ingredients that you can picture in their raw state or that are growing in nature. So if you see something that you can't pronounce and you think that it was made in a lab, you want to look out for that. And it is usually those big words that are really hard to pronounce. That's how you know it has a lot of added ingredients and preservatives. So you want to make sure it has the ingredient list is as short as possible. That's how you know it's more natural and better for you. And you also don't want to be fooled by those big health claims that are on a package. Some like the ones that say low fat, because sometimes it can distract you from them adding other items in higher amounts. Like it could say low fat, but then in the back of the label, it has a high amount of sugar or sodium. So you want to make sure you read through that whole label. And you also want to avoid foods with sugar listed in the first 3 ingredients. And you want to look out for those hidden added sugars as well. And like we talked about last week, you want to look for 100% whole grain foods. So even though it says whole, it might say whole in the front, you want to read that label in the back and make sure that the first ingredient, it does say like whole wheat flour or whole corn, or that it says whole oats. Okay, next slide. So right here we have an example. So this is the nutrition label for the recipe that Chef T is preparing for us today. And we can see the 3 labels that I wanted to go through is the sodium, the dietary fiber, and the protein. So like Chef T mentioned, she couldn't find the beans that were no sodium added or low sodium. So this number might not be accurate. So it could be higher or lower than 180. But that's just something that you want to keep in mind when you're reading the label, to look for the sodium content. And then for your dietary fiber, since we know that one is good for you, this recipe has 4 grams of dietary fiber. And then for our protein amount, it has 11 grams, which is a really good number. And we know we're getting that from the turkey as well as from the beans. So you go to next slide. And then these are the some canned recipe items that are used that we're using today with the beans and then the tomatoes as well as the tomato soup. And I think this is actually the same brand of beans that Chef T bought. And she also bought the kidney beans. The difference is that this one on the image, it says it's low sodium. So that's what you want to look out for if you're able to find it at the store. And you can see on the label, it has 140 milligrams of sodium. So it's even less than what is on the recipe. So if you can get that to a lower amount than what is on the recipe, that's great. And then you can also see it has 7 grams of protein. And then the 8 grams of fiber. So compared to that recipe, when we saw it says 11, so right here you can see that you're getting the 7 grams of protein from the beans, and then the other you're getting from your meat product, which is ground beef or ground turkey, whichever you choose. And then for diced tomatoes, I know Chef T got stewed tomatoes, so it's a little bit different. But from this image, you can see there is no salt added, so they didn't add any extra salt, and that's what you want to be looking for when you're buying these products, that they have the least amount of sodium and preservatives. And then as well as for the tomato soup, it also says low sodium, and then it also says on there that it has no high fructose corn syrup, so it doesn't have any added sugar as well. You can go to the next slide. So for right here, we're gonna go through how to create a meal plan and a grocery list. So this is important if you want to plan out your meals and planning meals ahead of time. It saves time and it saves you money, and it also encourages you to eat healthier because you're planning your meals ahead of time. And it's a great way also to teach your kids about the real world and getting them involved in the kitchen as well as when you're out shopping. You could have them be in charge of the grocery list or even have them a meal plan, something that they want to eat, and then they can break down the different items that are needed. So how you can do this, you can plan to make your meals for the week, and you want to make sure you include those recipes that you're going to be making. And then you want to use that recipe to help you buy those different items. And then you can break it down by the different produce items that are needed. So you want to, for this recipe, it's the hearty egg burritos. So the things that you'll be needing from the store, the produce would be the garlic, the bell pepper, and the green onion. Your dairy products would be eggs and low-fat cheese. For this one, it doesn't have any meat products, but you can also change up the recipe, add a meat product or make it a non-meat product like tofu. And then it also shows you the dry canned or boxed items, which is the whole wheat tortillas, the oil, or the black beans. And these are all things that you can substitute and change as you're, shopping at the store. So next. And right now we're going to be talking about those sample code date extensions. So we know a lot of items have those printed dates, like the sell by date. So it's good to know when it's safe to use the food beyond those printed dates. So if an item is generally considered safe to store and use beyond the best printed date, that duration is going to be listed in the table below. So this is just an example. And these are if they're unopened. So say you haven't opened like sliced bread, like a bag of bread. So we're going to be looking at the storage life past the expiration date. So the shelf life of sliced bread in its package that's unopened would be 4 days. And if you want to store it in the refrigerator, it'll last you longer. So it'll last about 14 days. And then in the freezer will be 3 months. So whichever way you want to store it, longer would be in the freezer. And another way to tell as well, like for these items, would be if you, you open it, or if you can see like if it's getting moldy or something. That's another way to check as well. And then for spices, the shelf life for those, if they're whole, would be 4 years, and if they're ground up, would be 2 years. So like Chef T mentioned, it's good to have a big collection of spices, and these are items that can last you for a very long time. So it's good to have a good collection of spices in your cupboard. And then we go to the next slide. And then some more items. Canned beans, which is something we're using today. The shelf life, if it's unopened, would be 3 years, which is a very long time. So it's really good to have a lot of canned items in your cupboard because they can last you a long time, and they're really easy to, make recipes out of, like today's recipe, the Speedy chili recipe, and just to use in other recipes that you make. And those, like, you can't store in the refrigerator or freezer. And then another one for peanut butter would be 18 months if you have it in the shelf. And then other items that we know are more delicate would be eggs and milk. So those would last, milk would last you 6 months, and then your eggs would last about 4 to 5 weeks in the refrigerator. So that's a good amount. And you also want to make sure you read that the expiration date on the package, because sometimes you buy them, like for me, for example, I bought a crate of eggs, and I thought they would last me like a whole week or 2 weeks, and then the sell by date was really soon, so I wasn't even able to use them. So you want to make sure you really look at that, the label when you're buying them. Okay, next slide. Okay, so right now we have our bean game. It's similar to our whole grain game that we did last week. And then so we have you guys participate in the chat. If you know which item is which type of bean, if you can answer in the chat. And then the different options are kidney beans, black beans, lentils, soybeans, garbanzo beans, and black-eyed peas. These are very common. I think a lot of these are also available in their canned form, as well as, the dry form. Okay, I'm reading the comments. So Dion said number 5 is garbanzo beans. And then we have Akeisha said number 6 is black-eyed peas. Do we have any other answers for the other options? Okay, so Brenda said 3 is lentils. Gisela said 3 is lentils as well. And then 5 is garbanzos. Keisha said number 4 is kidney beans. Yes. But I think you guys know your beans. We can go through the answers now. Yeah, so number 1 is soybeans. That one is a little bit harder to tell because they are a lot smaller. But we know that soybeans are used in a lot of different products now. So they're very common. And then we go to the next one. And 2 is the black beans. Those are pretty common as well and pretty easy to figure out. Let me go through to number 3. Number 3 is lentils. You guys guessed that one right as well. Number 4, kidney beans. Number 5 is garbanzo beans. And then number 6 is black-eyed peas. So a lot of these are really common. Oh, and then for number 5, garbanzo beans, they're also known as chickpea beans. So it's another name for them. So yeah, these are very common beans that you guys can use and use them in various recipes and or try out if you haven't used them. And then now I think we could take it back to Chef T.
And so this is what your pot of chili looks like right now. Now, the good thing about this chili is, with the exception of the stewed tomatoes, everything for this recipe I got at the 99-cent store. You're looking at $6 worth of product. Okay, so you could feed a small family, a family of about 3 or 4 people, and they could get nice and full, all for about $6. Okay, now I didn't put any seasoning in there at first because there's no seasoning listed on a recipe. What you need to understand, if you're looking for salt-free products, I couldn't find any when I looked, but because my beans were in the soap brine, the soup had soap in it, and the tomatoes did as well. When I cooked the chili, I didn't put any salt in it at all. And so, I stirred it up and tasted it. It didn't really need the salt. The salt content in the canned food was enough. And a lot of times that's the case. So it's always good to taste your food. Also, you want to keep in mind what you can add to it to make it more chili-ish, like chili powder or ground cumin. You could put some red pepper flakes in there, a little bit of chipotle pepper. There are all kinds of things you can put in there to kick up the heat a little bit and make it more chili-esque. You can even take it, and when you dish it up and put it in a bowl, sprinkle some cheese on the top. You could take this and you could do chili cheese nachos, chili cheese fries. So there are a lot of things you could do by making one thing like this. And this is actually something you can make early in the week and it will hold. Put it in an airtight container and seal it, and it will hold in your refrigerator for a couple days. Okay, so though this is quite filling in and of itself, you can also add roll in a salad or some cornbread, and you have a really nice meal. And this is what your chili looks like. and it smells really good too. And it took about 20 minutes to make. So you're talking 20 minutes and $6. How easy is that? Okay, to make it vegetarian, you just take out the turkey, the chicken, or the beef, add beans, add more beans. I actually like, when I make my chili, I like 4 or 5 different kind of bean chili. So I'll put the kidney beans in it, some pinto beans, some black beans, and I just put a lot of beans in it, and that's how I like my chili. You can also put other vegetables, peppers, mushrooms. Now, they don't technically go into chili, but if you're looking for ways to stretch a recipe, add vegetables to it. Okay, this is a nice way to feed the family for a minimum dollars. It's a great dish on a chilly day like today where it's kind of cold out and it's been kind of windy here lately. This is perfect for those kind of days. Okay, so this is the recipe, and I hope yours turned out as good as mine did. It smells wonderful and it tastes heavenly. Like I said, I've never made chili with soup before, but I think this is one of those that I'll be trying more at home because it's quick and it's easy, and I don't have to cook all day. Okay, so now we'll send it back to Johanna for questions and answers.
Thank you very much. So at this point, what I'll ask is if any of our families have any questions for us. We would like to hear what questions do we have, and maybe some of us, either Joanna or myself or Chef T, can answer. Let's see if there's any questions that we have. I see that Ms. Lucinda has a comment, so please go ahead, Ms. Lucinda, and then we'll have Anthony afterwards.
Should I talk or do you want me to put it in the chat? I'm so sorry.
Oh, you could talk. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So I had a comment regarding the sell-by date that's on items. That's actually not the expiration date. That's to let the stores know they need to sell it by that specific date or pull it from the shelf. And then it goes down to like food banks and so on and so forth, but it's not necessarily the expiration date on the item. They do have, some items have expiration dates, but the sell-by date usually depending on what item, and you might be able to talk to produce department or you know, whatever department you're looking at. And it's probably like 2 weeks after that date is when it actually spoils. Just wanted to share that.
Well, thank you, Miss Vieira. Thank you for that. I wasn't really fully aware of that either. So thank you again. So in this case, we want to just let many of our families know that next week will be our last of this cooking series that we've had over the last month or so. We want to mention that there's a couple of different things that each of you will be receiving throughout the sessions. We have printed out the workbooks that will go through the recipes and activities. We will send both an adult and a student one, so you could do activities with your child as well. Those should be prepared and should be mailed off over to your mailing address, and you should receive those sometime later next week. We have also in the process ordered some children chapter books that you'll receive later on once we receive that order. There's the kitchen utensil items that we have received as a donation kindly from Health Education Council. We also want to let you know too that there's also the big raffle. So for people who have participated in at least 4 or 5 sessions throughout this, will be part of a grand prize that we'll also raffle off at the end of our 5th session. And then I think, Joanna, do you want to talk a little bit about the next cooking workshop that you'll have this Saturday with the Sacramento Public Library, and then how they could register for that as well?
Yes, so this Saturday, I believe at 11 a.m., it's going to be virtual. We are leading a nutrition lesson for kids and for families as well with the Sac Public Library, and it'll be through Zoom. And I don't know if I have the Zoom link right now. I don't know if you have it available, Heriberto, or if you shared it in the chat for you guys to register. Last week we had it in Spanish, and then this week will be in English. So we would love for you guys to join us, especially for the kids. The lesson will be for the kids. If you guys can join us this Saturday through Zoom.
What we'll do is we'll send information as far as with the cooking workshop series and the different presentations and videos. We'll send it to you all via email after today. You should receive that sometime, probably tomorrow or Friday with that information. And I believe that the workshop that's going to be hosted this Saturday will be only in English. I don't think there's Spanish interpretation. Is that correct, Joanna?
Yeah, so last Saturday we had it in Spanish, and then this week will be in English.
Okay. So with that, thank you very much for all of you who have logged in today. We appreciate your participation, your attendance, your comments. If you have any questions, you can reach out either to Joanna at jramirez or health@council.org, or with myself, heriberto.soto@twinriversusd.org. With that, we want to thank you very much and appreciate your participation and just for being here today. And hopefully it doesn't rain as much.